We were just talking about Lamar Jackson having his own interviewing himself, or having his own production company interviewing him, whatever the situation is with Lamar, Charles. I would watch Jamal Williams interview himself.
I wear ankle socks. What's wrong with ankle socks? There's nothing wrong with ankle. Why are you going to ankle socks?
But I think he was wearing ankle socks with an outfit that probably didn't call for ankle socks. Maybe that was what it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or they also do the hidden joints that make it look like you don't have socks on at all, like, you know, but you do.
Yeah.
So you're not just don't have your feet inside the shoes. Those joints.
Yeah, it was funky. Yeah. That's funky. People who don't wear socks. I'm sorry, I can't. I absolutely cannot co-sign on that ever.
I do want to stay in the AFC South, Charles. Scott Fitterer had his first press conferences trading for the number one pick today. He said the Panthers have conviction about multiple QBs, still going through their process. Frank Reich said not to read too much into his history with taller quarterbacks. And oh, by the way, our own Chris Sims has his quarterback rankings out. He has C.J. Stroud as his top-ranked quarterback for whatever that's worth. And I guess a couple of things I'd like to just say and ask about the Panthers. One, whether or not this is just gamesmanship when it comes to maybe wanting to trade down, or do they have a guy in mind, but they just want to keep their options open in case they trade, whatever. But also, you've written some great stuff about David Tepper and this relentless pursuit of a quarterback over the years. And I'm fascinated by this quarterback incubator that they're building. Like, most quarterbacks, when you go to the number one overall pick, you're like, man, that's a bad team. That's going to be tough. Man, the people they've signed, most recently, Adam Thielen, Hayden Hurst, Miles Sanders, they already had a good offensive line. They have a good defense. And this coaching staff, this all-star veteran coaching staff, it's they set themselves up to whoever they pick should thrive. Oh, and Andy Dalton as the backup. I forgot Andy Dalton as the backup, yeah.
Right, Andy Dalton, who will take some at least initial pressure off if whoever they select isn't ready to go out of the gate, which I would suspect they will be, but he's good in the room, he's good in support role, Andy Dalton. Look, first and foremost, I think that it's March 20th. They're not done with their process yet. And as far as other options on the table, if they identify two quarterbacks they like, could they slide back? We're going to go into the owners' meetings, later this week. We'll see if there's any, Scott Fitterer meets with anybody, David Tepper meets with anybody, but right now, I really truly believe they're not settled on C.J. Stroud. I see C.J. Stroud's the betting favorite to be the number one pick in the draft right now. I do think they're still going through their options at the moment. About the only option I think I would probably eliminate for them, I don't think Lamar Jackson, this is going to be some kind of a situation where they're setting themselves up to sign Lamar Jackson and hoping that Baltimore just goes ahead and declines to match it and then has the number one pick and selects its next quarterback. Now that I've said that, though, that's definitely what's going to end up happening.
Wait, is that a thing? Is that a theory? That they got the number one pick in order to incentivize Baltimore not to match it? Is that following you?
I would not say that's a theory. I would say that I had a team executive ask me, do you think that Baltimore would match if Carolina signed Lamar, now that Carolina has the number one overall pick? Do you think that Baltimore would ultimately match, or would they take the number one pick? My first question was, can they even include that number one overall pick? The way the franchise tag works, does it have to be your original picks? I would think, given who asked me the question, they can include that number one overall pick. It raised the thought in my mind, like, is there any way this is a long play where Carolina is interested in Lamar, and if it doesn't ultimately work out, they still have the first overall pick to select a quarterback. So either way, they either get it through the draft or I don't think that that's anything that Carolina, that this is some kind of long play for Lamar Jackson. I do think they're going to end up selecting. And I don't think they're going to move out of that pick, to be perfectly honest with you, because I think where do you move unless it's swapping with Houston? Houston absolutely has only one quarterback they want. I don't think you move anywhere past two. So
right, because Arizona ain't trying to come up, and the Colts will probably stay right there. Just for whatever it's worth, Michael. Fitterer said he's a great option, a really expensive option, but we're focused on more of the draft picks at this point. Talk about Lamar.
Let me ask you both about this, because I agree, Michael. You said a lot of nice things about Carolina off the top, and I sit here honestly with a twisted lip at the Carolina Panthers, because yes, they're doing a lot of wonderful things. But I go back to, this is how inequities become structural, become systematic, or systemic, if you prefer. That is, let's go back to Steve Wilks. Steve Wilks finished strong with very limited resources in Carolina on the fly. And this is what black folks know what I'm talking about. In a number of professions, we're handed a bunch of crap at times, and hey, make the best of this, and we make something out of it. So Steve Wilks did that with the Carolina Panthers, who were left for dead, and by the way, moved on for Robbie Anderson and Christian McCaffrey as he was trying to figure it out. So at the end of the year, David Tepper doesn't even have the decency to go to his final game. And after Steve Wilks is fired, they bring in Frank Reich. They make a trade for the #1 pick. They assemble this all-star coaching staff. My point is, they could have done the same thing with Steve Wilks. They could have spent resources on the coaching staff. They could have moved up for the #1 pick. And now Frank Reich will get credit for a better operation than Steve Wilks ever had a shot at getting. And so this is what's so damn frustrating.
It is
about the
frustrating.
plight of black coaches in this league. The beat goes on.
It is frustrating. Steve Wilks absolutely, if anyone does not recognize the job that he did down the stretch for the Panthers last year, they weren't paying attention. I think that he's going to kill it being the defensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers. I think he's going to be a head coach again. I truly believe that. Now, that said, I can answer to why he didn't get the job in Carolina. When Matt Rule was fired, David Tepper met with people in the building, and he said, here's what we're going to do. #1 priority is fixing the quarterback situation long-term, okay? Told everyone what the timeline was going to be for them, but it was option number 1, 2, 3, 4. It was all fix the quarterback. And David Tepper wanted to pair that quarterback with an offensive head coach who would not leave. He did not want to lose a coordinator. He didn't want to be in a situation in Buffalo where Brian Daboll goes out the door and it feels like Buffalo took a little step back in the postseason.
He wants to have. It's so stupid. That's so stupid.
I'm just telling you.
Why did Brian Daboll leave? Because they were successful. He left because the organization was successful.
Right.
So when you're successful, people leave. Ask San Francisco. Ask New England over the years. Kansas
City.
But head
coaches don't leave.
When you're successful,
head coaches don't
people
leave when
leave.
you're successful.
But
Head
the
coaches
coordinators
don't leave
do.
when you're successful. The coordinators do.
He just wanted an offensive head coach.
He wanted an offensive head coach to pair with the quarterback the way Doug Peterson, frankly, is paired with Trevor Lawrence. That's what he wanted. He watched what Doug Peterson did with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and he said, wow, look how fast that entire operation turned around. Look at the relationship between Doug Peterson, the former quarterback, and the quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, who's going to be there, probably be one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the league for the next 10, 15 years. These owners all copy each other. They all pay attention to each other's franchises. And ultimately, that's what he really wanted. Now, I will say this, though, Michael Holley. He was a minority owner where? Pittsburgh, right? Pittsburgh didn't have an offensive head coach with Ben Roethlisberger.
Well, I was just going to say, the biggest example is we just finished talking about the Patriots. I mean, Belichick and Brady, or Manning and Dungy. So, Michael, I appreciate everything you said about Steve Wilks, and you preached to the choir on that for both of us.
He's going to be a head coach, by the way. He's going to be a head coach.
No, right.
And I'm not saying. I'm just saying. Let's not sleep on that. Steve Wilks going to be a head coach.
No, for sure. He got a raw deal in Arizona. We're saying he did the incredible job that David Tepper said he needed to do. So I agree with everything you're saying, Michael. But now that that's done, I do like what they've done in terms of the coaching staff, but you're right. They could have done that with a defensive coach in Steve Wilks and potentially gotten the same results that it would get Frank Reich. And I like Frank Reich, with all due respect. But tongue-in-cheek, I say, well, if you want an offensive coach, you could have hired Eric Bieniemy. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah,
as Eric Bieniemy is in Washington. Right. Speaking of Washington, Charles, I never thought I would live to see this. And part of me almost don't want to get too excited. And I'm not even a Commanders fan. But it just seems like we're getting close to a change coming in D.C. when it comes to ownership.
Michael, but God.
Well, because, I guess I would wonder, Charles, whether it's the fact that they reportedly cleared out the Snyders from the facility, delayed signing bonus payments due to recent contracts. I guess I just wonder, it feels quick from an NFL standpoint, correct me if I'm wrong, Charles, for the Snyders to select a buyer and then for the NFL to vet and approve that buyer by next week, by the league meeting in Arizona. That seems a little fast, but having said that, it feels like this process is speeding up. What do you know?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's definitely speeding up. I don't think there's any question. As you said, packing things up, the delay of bonus payments. I also think that, look, the reality is, too, the NFL can only drag out this external investigation into Snyder for so long. Eventually, that's got to come to bear. It's clear that that's something that's going to end up coming out after the sale of the franchise. Well, they need the sale of the franchise to happen so they can go ahead and wrap up that piece of business, because it's making them look worse and worse by the day, which doesn't seem possible at this point when it comes into investigations into owners. But I would think a lot of heavy lifting gets done at the owners' meetings. I don't know that it gets done at the owners' meetings, but I think that you're going to start to see T's crossed and I's dotted. And I at this point, I would be shocked if it doesn't end up being Jeff Bezos, but I just don't know the buyer who can come close to that $7 billion. It's not, you don't have a ton of people to select from at that stage.
Right. You can hate Jeff Bezos if you're Dan Snyder, but you ain't trying to take less money because you hate him.
By the way, it might be a situation where it's like hundreds of millions of dollars less. Yeah, I mean, there's no, buy another yacht to make yourself happy.
That's cutting off your nose to spite your face right there.
Yeah.
Where do you think it would show up, though? Let's think ahead. If Daniel Snyder is out, if you are a Washington Commanders fan, will you, other than the psychic relief of just moving on from Snyder? Shout out Stokely. I hear you, Stokely. I hear you. Good. I'm glad you're on the show.
He almost never does
but
that.
do you think a Commanders fan will feel that or see that if they when they change ownership?
I hope so. I mean, I hope they will. I mean, I could right
and
now.
How so?
Okay, well, first off, let's get a real statue for Sean Taylor. Okay, let's not do the mannequin in the wire mannequin in a jersey crap. So first and foremost, step out and say, all right, we're going to honor Sean Taylor appropriately, and we're going to actually, if we're going to have a statue for the man, we're going to have a real statue for the man. And that statue is going to be where the new stadium is, which is going to be in progress. So I think the first thing you do is you address some of the inequities that have happened inside the building when it comes to the culture of the building, the environment that the employees work in. I think, right now, let's think about this. How often do we ever hear from Dan Snyder? Ever, really, realistically? Almost never, right? He's not, despite being someone who is functional in the room with the owners and someone who, they need his vote when they want to pass things. He's a blip, when it comes to nationally and the owners that mean anything, to the surrounding. I mean, he's hated. That's what he's known for. So that shift alone should make fans feel a lot better. But whoever comes in is going to have a plan. I can tell you that. It's not going to be hey, we'll figure it out as we go. They're probably going to have a punch list of things that they're going to roll out so the fan base immediately knows, here are all the things that are going to start improving. First with a stadium, a statue, every other grievance Maybe they won't charge $200 for parking anymore, or whatever the hell they're charging for parking. Give back something.
I'd love to see him on Hard Knocks. If they sell, I'd love to see him on Hard Knocks this coming season. That'd be a fascinating look inside the remaking of that organization. Speaking of Hard Knocks, look what Hard Knocks did for the Lions in terms of just their general perception. Now you got Gardner Johnson going from the Eagles to the Lions, jumping on our bandwagon that we built, Michael Holley. So I know you're a Detroit guy, but still, Michael and I built that bandwagon. But honestly, the Gardner Johnson story intrigues me more for the guy we just talked about on Friday. But since then, Odell Beckham has weighed in on these reports, and you even referenced it, Charles, we talk about it, that he wants $20 million a year. And I would say to Odell, and it's so funny, Charles, because I talked to you that night. It feels like just yesterday when I was in New England and reporting for Amazon on the Odell situation, talking about him needing to take a prorated one-year deal last year in order to take part in this market, wouldn't do it then, still has not signed because he says $4 million is not enough. But my thing is this, bro. That's fine that you know your worth. But this ain't 5 years ago, number one. Number two, the longer you hold out for what you think you're worth, and maybe you are, but unfortunately you can't pay yourself. You can interview yourself, but you can't pay yourself. If the longer you hold out, the more these teams move on. So my concern is even if he can still play, that the game will go on without him. It's not really a question. That was just me getting on a soapbox.
His age isn't changing, okay? When you look at his history as a player, he's played 2 seasons in his entire career where he's healthy the entire season, okay? That's not changing. The best prime years, Odell, we're talking double-digit touchdown catches, big receiving numbers, the superstar. That was the first 3 years of his career, okay? It's a long time ago. And I think he has to come. It sucks. And I do mean this. It sucks because I feel like we were robbed of a Hall of Fame caliber player by all these injuries, what he could have been. It's stupefying to think of what was taken off the field. Now, that said, what happened. He gambled on himself with the Rams. He was a half a football away from cashing in on that gamble. He suffered another knee injury, okay? And I think that the best he's going to end up doing at this point is, and I was surprised that he said 4. That surprised me.
That's a big gap.
That's a really big gap, and I thought his number would end up being more near like 12. The only way he's getting 12 now is if he signs a deal that has massive incentives. So maybe we're talking about a 6-year, a $6 million guarantee and $6 million worth of incentives over the course of a season, something of that nature. But he's just going to have to figure out, what he wants at this point in his career and his life. And the Chiefs just let Juju Smith-Schuster go to the Patriots. They could use a veteran wide receiver. They have a player who wears number 15 who could probably do decently well with Odell Beckham Jr. in 2023.
Yeah.
I would like to see that. Let's start that bandwagon. How about that?
Cowboys have already moved on.
Yeah, and speaking of the Cowboys, Mike and Charles, I think Mike knows this. Charles, my first 7 years in Boston, I lived in 7 different apartments. I was moving every year.
I did not know that.
And I think I still have the record over Brandin Cooks, but homeboy is approaching fast. Brandin Cooks gets around, but I think he gets around to good situations. You tell me. I think he wound up in a beautiful situation in Dallas as their second or third receiver. Take your pick.
Yeah, four trades right now at this point, tied for first all time amongst players in trades during the course of their career. I think it's a really good situation. The Cowboys badly need a number 2 receiver. I think it will slide Michael Gallup to number 3. Gallup didn't bounce back in 2022 the way that I think he wanted to, but he's also coming off of an injury that I think, give him another year, get his confidence back in the knee, and those trio of receivers are great. The thing with Cooks is, and I think this is part of why he ends up getting dealt and he moves around. What is he? I think that in all these past places, when he's acquired, you're sitting there and you're going, oh, it's like, oh, they just went and picked up a top flight #1 receiver. And then he's not a #1 receiver. He's just not. Like, and then I think eventually teams figure that out and they go, we don't want to pay him to be a #1 receiver because he's not a #1 receiver. He's #2 receiver. Cowboys have identified him as a #2 receiver. It's the right situation. Cheap pickup, relatively. And I think they'll do really well.
And on the heels of Gilmore. And on the heels of Stephon Gilmore. That's a pretty damn good offseason for them.
He's a tweener, though, because he's better than a 2. I mean, look at the production of his career. He's great. How many, like 6 1,000-yard seasons for him? He's had a great deal of production. If you look at his numbers,
listen,
he's not a #1, but he's better than a 2.
Okay, in today's NFL, though, 2s should all be 1,000-yard receivers, okay, given the passing league that we now have. Every team, if they're worth their salt, really should have the capability of having 2,000-yard receivers, whether it's a tight end and a wide receiver, 2 wide receivers, or whatever. You're right. I would say he's a 2+. I would say that he's a very high-level 2, and you can see with the production and also the fact that he can take the lid off of a defense. You can see why teams in the past have gone, well, that's a 1. We're going to get in a 1. We're going to pay a 1. We're going to give up something for a 1. He got traded for a first-round pick. I mean, you don't trade in the past. You don't trade a first-round pick for a wide receiver anymore, right? That alone suggests that you're a 1. So he's a very good, he's a very good veteran player. It fits perfectly for what the Cowboys want to do. I think, that and the Gilmore signing are 2 very good veteran additions for them.
Appreciate you, man. Hey, Michigan State, this is all y'all do, right? Like, I don't hear nothing about y'all all year, and then y'all just come and wreck shop for this March Madness that's just at an all-time high for its madness. Congrats. Go green, go white, right?
I rep every March, me and Draymond.
Hey, thank you for watching Brother from Another. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, go ahead and do that now. Don't forget, you can catch us 3 to 4 weekdays on PeacockTV.com and on Sirius XM Channel 85.